This is Linux in Laws, a podcast on topics around free and open source software, any associated contraband, communism, the revolution in general, and whatever else fancies your tickle. Please note that this and other episodes may contain strong language, offensive humor, and other, certainly not politically correct language. You have been warned. Our parents insisted on this disclaimer. Happy, Mum? Thus, the content is not suitable for consumption in the workplace, especially when played back on a speaker in an open plan office or similar environments. Any minors under the age of 35, or any pets, including fluffy little killer bunnies, your trusted guide dog, unless on speed, and cute T-Rexes or other associated dinosaurs. Martin, before we get this thing on the road, let's do a pre-recording manifest check. So, what about the engine room? Are the people in the engine room still on industrial action, as in are striking?
I don't know. Did you hire some French people?
No, I didn't, Martin.
Oh,
I didn't.
okay.
I reckon so. That's a check. What about the flux compensator? Capacitor.
Well, if it's anything to do with your headphones, then they're probably not working.
No, it was under maintenance a few weeks ago, so I'm just wondering, basically.
Yeah.
The payment
it hasn't worked much at all recently, I have to say. It's more out of action than it is.
Okay, but the Mexican cartel issued the payments.
Did they?
I'm just wondering, so...
I don't know, I'm not in charge of finances. Well, no,
who is?
I don't think we have a finance department, actually. No. But if we do, we should
Mark, you see, that explains a lot.
That seems like a good idea.
Okay. Well, let's back to several rounds. Let's continue with the manifest for the pre-recording checkup. What about dancing girls and other entertainment for the two co-hosts?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yes, are they available or not?
I don't know. You have to ask the event lady.
Martin, you were supposed to take a look at these things before we take off.
This has been delegated to the events lady,
who apparently was fired alongside HR and marketing.
Oh dear. Oh well.
No, Martin,
that one out the window then. Yeah.
I read this mail this morning, so.
Well, it's a long time since this morning.
Yes, but so you fired marketing and HR once again. But this is the 35th HR marketing department with 5 years of podcasting.
Way more than that. Way more. It's been going for 5 years. Yeah.
So, Martin, how are the sound effects? Are they in place?
Yeah, check.
Final check. Do we have a topic to discuss?
We do.
Excellent.
Yes.
So that's another tick in the box.
We normally
we won't reveal too much now, because otherwise people will just turn off. So no, not happening. Okay. So pre-recording manifest done, sorted. So we're ready to take off.
Sounds like we're in our usual state of chaos.
Exactly. So let's get this show on the road.
Yeah, let's do it.
Welcome to Linux in Laws, Season 2, Episode 28. Mr. Visser, how are things?
Yes, Mr. Zimmerman, things are okay, apart from a certain election result.
Martin,
not go into that.
We specifically said we specifically agreed on not to mention politics. So
yes.
You see, the thing is, Martin.
Well, that just leaves the weather and all that kind of nonsense.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. You see, we're recording this in March of 2027. No,
you just said 6th of November.
Yes, Martin.
You have a very short
time shift. This is this kind of summer winter time thing, no? So if there's some random African ruler that has just been replaced by some random African election, I mean, why does it matter anyway?
Well, in this case,
I mean, it's only Africa, right? So no big deal.
We weren't exactly talking about Africa, but yeah, anyway, not true.
But this is not about African elections or something.
It is not.
But rather, no, it's not. But rather about an open source project called, Martin?
Well, it depends.
Yes, well, exactly.
It depends. It's either Linux or Rust. So one of the
Or
three.
maybe both, yes.
Maybe both.
So the topic of today's episode is actually Rust in the Linux kernel. So before we go into the nitty-gritty details of how to do this, why it's a good idea and all the rest of it, we should probably...
No. Wait. Nobody said it was a good idea.
Well,
Yeah,
this is my personal opinion, right? So, okay, bear with me.
Okay.
Okay, we should probably explain not what the Linux kernel is, because we assume that this is basic knowledge with our listenership knows. So anyway, but we should probably go into the history of Rust just a little bit, because I reckon there are still two people out there in the audience who haven't listened to the past 50 episodes of something called Linux.in-laws that tackled Rust and its ecosystem. Links, of course, in May one of the show notes, people. So stay tuned. No, jokes aside. Why is Rust a natural choice for a language to implement certain portions of the Linux kernel going forward? In that case, probably we should basically spend 2 minutes on the history of Linux and why Linux has chosen C and has blatantly said that C++ is not an option since day one from the inception of something called the Linux kernel.
Indeed. So let's start with the...
Exactly. So going back in time, it's 1782. Charles Babbage has just invented. No, I'm joking. No, I mean, fair to say, Linus Torvalds came up with this kind of problem project in, what was it, 1991, 92, something like that?
You're talking about Linux now?
Yes, yes, I am, Martin.
I don't remember Linux starting.
Okay, and...
yes, been around for a while.
Yeah, I mean, we should probably even go back further. Okay, Linus took a leaf of a book called Unix. Unix being one of the raving multiprocessing, multi-user systems going back to the 60s, because the first edition called Unix System 3 was actually developed or started to be developed in 1969. At that stage, it was a mixture of C and assembler. C, of course, being the keyword here, because C at that stage already was a programming language which had two major advantages. A, it was an abstraction of actually physical hardware in terms of you could use a symbolic language as a programming language that wasn't assembler, but was still very close to the hardware. And it had been developed in the 60s, and that's the reason why a couple of chaps who were tasked with the development of Unix decided to not just write it complete in assembler, but rather to use C. To cut a long story short, during the 70s, to cut a long story short, during the 70s and 80s, that didn't really change. All of these subsequent releases of Unix, namely System 7, System 5, the BSDs of the world, and all the rest of these Unix spin-offs, for want of a better word, were written in C, and much, and you could actually, if you take a look at the history, you will see this trend of that quite a few portions of the assembler-based code base was replaced by C during the course of time. Because if you take a look, for example, at the BSD codebase or at the Linux codebase, you will see a clear separation between a tiny part that is still written in assembler, mostly hardware stuff, as in hardware-related stuff, but the rest is still C. So C has been probably the language of choice for the last 50 years. At the beginning of the 90s.
For many things, right?
For many things. Exactly. Because of these properties. And so Linus, when he first kind of came up with the idea of writing this all-favored terminal emulator in the early 90s, came up with the idea, of course, let's do it in C, like all the other people had done it before. But C, of course, has a number of disadvantages. Namely, Martin.
Well, it depends what you compare it to.
Lisp, Pascal, Fortran, Python, and probably Rust, to name a few.
Well, I mean, the main one is something to do with pointers, right? But,
Indeed. So why's that problem, Martin? Going
well,
back to university days.
things tend to crash, which is never good. You don't want that one.
Yes. Martin has an absolute valid point. Of course, C has a type system, but this is not enforced. So you can do all sorts of crazy casts. And of course, you can access a pointer which is no longer valid. Hence this beloved notion of a segmentation fault. And for those people who have programmed in C or derived languages on
well,
Linux,
people who have used any kind of software based on C, they've probably come across it.
Exactly. I mean, even going back to the old Amiga days, you still have this Guru, which most of the time, because it was still a kind of multiprocess operating system, basically. And if you would run into something very similar to segmentation fault, yes, you would get a Guru error, Guru meditation error to be precise. And you had this all over the place with even operating systems which were not Unix based, because most of them basically would use C or C++ as the main implementation language, and C++, of course, being a pimped version of C. Is that the expression I'm looking for, Martin? As in C with a lot of syntactic sugar on top, as in like classes and some sort of object orientation, but it still has the kind of inherent problems that C brings to the table. Namely, pointer problems, memory management, all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. And that's probably one of the reasons why, going back to the early days, it's what?
Any particular ones?
Mid-90s. The internet has just taken off, and a couple of people decided to write a graphic user interface that you could use to browse the internet, called?
Mozilla, probably.
Exactly, a browser. It was then called Netscape Navigator, but it was still written in C.
Yes.
If you remember the days, you're looking at mid-90s, exactly. This was subsequently open source, and then a foundation took over called Mozilla Foundation, which had the brilliant idea of, evolve the code base to a mixture of JavaScript, XUL, details will be the show notes. We won't go into the technical details. And C and some other languages, which led to a code base which was inherently very complex, had a lot of technical depth, and was pretty much, you're talking about the mid-zeros now, pretty much, I wouldn't say unmaintainable, but close to it. So the Mozilla Foundation came up with this idea of, we probably need something else, medium term, to do away with this mounting technical depth. Hence, Rust was born. The idea was essentially to replace portions and portions and portions of the Mozilla, as in the Firefox code base, with which then still had the kind of legacy of C and C++, with Rust as the main implementation language. And they started with the rendering engine called Servo, if I'm not completely mistaken. So they came up with the initial commit, I think it was 2009 or something like that. And if you take a look at the modern day code base of not just Firefox, but also derived products, Thunderbird comes to mind, for example, you will see more and more Rust evolving in terms of being visible in the code base right then, right there. Okay, Martin, if you take a look, I'm sure, because you were there, that you can still remember some of the traits that various people have discussed on the podcast when it comes down to Rust and advantages.
Mm-hmm.
Name a few.
Well, people always rave about the memory safety.
Yes. Care to elaborate?
Well, yeah. It's actually, one of the nice things, going back aside from the memory safety, that I found thing about Rust is that the compiler is also written in Rust itself.
Yes, indeed. They started out with an LLVM backend, but they quickly came to the conclusion that this has to be self-sustainable. And yes, today versions are pretty much Rust-based. But memory safety, why is that important? I mean, beyond this pointer problem, why is that important?
I don't know. You tell me. You're the Rust expert.
Am I? I mean, for example,
among the two of us, let's put it that way.
Fair enough, exactly. So, I mean, for example, Rust.
How many Rust kernel modules you've written?
A bit, let's put it this way. No, I mean, Rust, for example, has this notion of lifetime, basically that the compiler can establish the exact point in time, and that goes along with ownership as well, when a piece of memory is allocated to variable and how this variable changes ownership over the course of the lifetime of the program.
Yes, I remember this now. Yeah.
Exactly.
I did dabble a little bit. Yeah.
So the main idea is actually to shift left. And this is the awesome part where Martin can put his software engineering skills to full use.
Sounds like a register to me.
I mean, what does shift left mean? I mean, shift left means basically that you are moving much of the debugging effort from the testing phase.
You weren't talking about registers. Carry on. Yeah.
No, I'm not. To the development phase. So a modern Rust compiler and a modern Rust compiler is actually able to tell you, because of these notions of lifetime and ownership and all the rest of it, when actually a problem when a program may contain a problem. In terms of you do not compile, build, and finally debug the executable, but the compiler will tell you at compile time, sorry, you can't do this. And here are the reasons why. I mean, if you use a Rust compiler, the error codes that you will get from said compiler do most of the time not only contain a very detailed description of the error, but also HTML links to certain web pages that go into the details. So essentially, the compiler takes you by the hands and leads you away from potentially dangerous situations. So it's quite natural that Linus, actually, when was it? 2029 or something? 2019 or something like that? When Linus said, in contrast to C++, and of course, links will be in the show notes, Linus dismissed in the 90s, Linus really dismissed C++ as an implementation language for the kernel going forward. So
but there's reasons for that as well, right?
Details will be in the show notes to a specific mail that Linux sent to the Linux kernel mailing list, explaining why he thought that using C++ and still thinks that using C++ as an implementation language for the kernel is stupid. Let's put it this way. And
what were those his exact words?
No, he used much more colorful language.
Yeah.
As Linus normally does, right? So no big deal. No, jokes aside, the idea was, and Linus must have taken a very serious look at Rust, because Linus being Linus, he's not, let's put it this way, convinced easily. That's probably a fair assumption, Martin, no?
Yeah.
Given his track record.
Yeah, he isn't. He kind of has an opinion that is not easily changed.
Exactly. Maybe. So he must clearly seen the advantages if some people approached him and said, no, look, C is great, but we have something better called Rust. Because he officially gave his blessing, I think it was in the late teens, to say, okay, go ahead. This is something worth exploring in terms of why don't you, I think marketing would call it an MVP as a minimal viable product in terms of a proof of concept that may work. And that's exactly what a couple of people set out to do?
Yeah, initially it was just on some device drivers and stuff like that.
Yes, this is how this started.
Hmm.
Now, given the fact that we have still 3 hours, 27 minutes in this episode, we actually could go into the details of what to do if you want to integrate a safe systems programming language in an unsafe systems programming language environment, namely if you want to integrate Rust in C.
Well, when you say integrate Rust in C, what do you mean?
Now, C is, as we all know, inherently memory unsafe.
Boo!
Because you can allocate memory, you can release memory, and nobody prevents you from using.
What do you mean by integrating the two languages?
Rust has this notion of the compiler knows at every point in time who owns a piece of memory, and also knows when it's going to be released, when it's going to be allocated, and all the rest of it.
Yep.
So, and this is, imagine Donald Trump marrying.
Who?
If Hillary Clinton wasn't married, and if they would meet at a bar. Imagine, to get the point across, imagine, I'm trying to paint a picture now of how C might get along, or what you have to do if you want to marry C with Rust. Imagine Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, before you go on to that Hillary Clinton story, they are two different languages that are compiled with different compilers. So what do you mean by integrating them?
That's precisely my point, Martin.
Oh, okay. It goes to do with Hillary Clinton. Okay, carry on.
I'm just trying to make a picture here. Okay. No, imagine Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
He was. The last name, of course, is wrong because he was.
Hillary Clinton walks into a bar. Yeah.
Yeah. So Hillary, somebody, because she wasn't called Clinton at the time, but that's beside the point. Okay. No, links maybe in the show notes of the exact nature of her second name. Hillary walks into a bar in the 80s or prior to meeting Bill, whenever they got married in the first place, probably the 60s. I don't know.
Who knows? Anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. And meeting this self-made millionaire called Donald Trump.
Okay.
He, of course, being the millionaire, and she's at that stage probably already a sworn-in Democrat.
Oh yeah.
The conversion of beloved Donald to Republican ideas probably came later, but I'm still trying to explain that these two characters are the exact opposite of each other because they actually ran for presidency in 2016, if I'm completely mistaken, as in were competing for the seat. I wouldn't go as far as this when comparing Rust to C, but you have to go through some hoops if you want to marry a memory unsafe language with a memory safe one. As probably most people can imagine, certain portions of the kernel have to talk to other parts of the kernel all of the time. For example, even device drivers have to allocate memory, for example, to store the data that they get from devices, and then to pass that on to different parts of the kernel. Have to release that memory, have to get CPU slots and all the rest of it. So if you want to integrate a Rust-based device driver into the kernel, you actually have to make sure that the Rust portion of the code is aware of these inherent dangers. And that's the reason why you have to create a shim, for want of a better expression, between the C-based kernel code and the Rust-based portion, so that these two parts are able to talk to each other.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, it depends how the communication between those two happens, right?
The kernel. Everybody who's looked at the kernel code is probably familiar with the following details. But normally the kernel, and I mean this is the inherent characteristic of a monolithic kernel such as Linux, all of the components, and I'm not talking about kind of programs running in user space, I'm talking about the kernel components itself, talk to each other via direct function invocations. So they're all within the same address space, and they don't have to cross any process boundaries. And I'm just talking about the native kernel now.
Okay. Yeah.
So the fastest way is actually a call from a CPU perspective, a call to an address. And that's exactly how the kernel works internally. And because kernel components trust each other, introducing Rust in the kernel is, of course, a little bit tricky because Rust is under the assumption that if there's a piece of code that is not Rust-based, you cannot trust it. For example, when it comes down to memory safety.
Well,
so
before you go on, what does that mean, right, to the Rust piece of code?
That's exactly this notion of a shim that quite a few people thought about when they were serious about introducing Rust to the kernel. So what they wrote is, and details of course will in the show notes, what they wrote is essentially a kind of a
something that takes it being memory safe. Yeah.
Almost, yes. You can actually tell Rust now, look, the code that you're about to call is memory unsafe, so please take necessary precautions. So Rust has the notion of a crate, and a crate, of course, being something similar to a library in other programming languages. So what they did is they wrote a set of crates that allow the Rust code to talk to the rest of the C-based kernel code base with these precautions. And of course, they started in 2019, 2018 with the device drivers. But time has moved on since then, no, Martin?
Apparently we're in 2027, I think.
2027, exactly. So that's about almost 10 years. After the initial commit, no jokes aside, we're recording this in 2025, right?
Or
maybe later, maybe earlier. Yeah, time flies.
To
cut a long story short, there have been two important Linux kernel Plumber conference presentations on the subject. The first one in 2021, where the general concept was introduced of how to do it. And as I said, we won't go into technical details. Never, despite the 3-hour time limit of the episode, no jokes aside. No, the technical details are somewhat kind of minute, so I'm just going to refer to the show notes. This year, again, there was another presentation on the progress of the project. And I'm happy to report that actually progress has moved beyond device drivers. Now, replacing the majority of the code base in the kernel is still a long shot, but I reckon my fair guess would be that in maybe 15 years, you'll see more core components being extended or replaced with Rust code.
Well,
things like memory management, schedulers, and more.
Yeah, so, well, you say that, but that is essentially dependent on certain maintainers changing their stance, right? Because as any open source project, it's maintained by a bunch of contributors who have probably worked on this for a number of years, writing their code in their C language. So for them to refactor stuff would be something that they are not that keen to do, right?
Yes, very good point, Martin. But I reckon you will see more and more amendments to the code rather than replacements. For example, the 2024 presentation talks about a least recently used memory management module of being not just rewritten, but rather extended in Rust. For the two people in the audience who are not familiar with kernel development.
Oh no!
The kernel maintains, and I'm going to leave it at a very high level from a technical perspective. The kernel maintains two lists of, and I'm simplifying very much now. The kernel maintains two lists of page sets in terms of the pages that are actively used by programs, and the set of pages that are not actively used, and hence the notion least recently used, because essentially you're talking about eviction candidates if the system runs low on memory, because the least recently used pages probably will be transferred to swap space in that case. Push comes to shove, this algorithm has been in the kernel from day one, but more recently, some people have come up with a better implementation of this, and they actually did it in Rust rather than C. So I see improvements going forward to be implemented in Rust rather than replacing existing technologies more and more. So
it's like individual components, right?
Exactly. So if some bright spark comes up with an idea of how to do it better, chances are he or she or it may decide to do it in Rust rather than C.
Yeah, I mean, yes, makes sense. But yeah, as the majority of the code base obviously is in C, and the majority of the maintainers are obviously mostly familiar with C or haven't written their code in C. It's going to take some time, right?
Oh, yeah.
Indeed. But okay, let's take a look at the big picture, Martin. C is about 50 years old.
Oh no!
Mm-hmm.
As in,
also, isn't there like 20 million lines in this kernel? I can't remember now. Or is that
maybe even more? I don't know. Details may have on the show notes.
Quite a lot.
In that case, actually, there's a simple command to find out. Actually, it's called word count.
Yeah.
So if you've nothing better to do on a Saturday afternoon, just count the lines of C code in the kernel. You'll come up with a lot. Martin is probably right with assuming that order of magnitude anyway. But looking at the big picture again, you have a program language that is about 50 years old. You have a kernel that is about 30 years old now, more than that. So at some stage, some of the old people will retire and even die at some stage. But I reckon the cool hipsters and new kids on the block will choose Rust rather than C. So Martin, given the fact that this has really kind of made inroads over the last 5 years, 6 years, almost.
Yeah.
So what do you make of it?
Well, what do I make of it? I do like the whole sort of Rust movement, as in not movement. Well, you know what I mean. The idea behind it, and having a language that can do things a lot easier than C and better. So I do like that. I mean, Rust in the kernel, yes. Like any old software project, you are up against a lot of legacy stuff, right? And
oh dear,
the number of times that people are talking about technical depth and refactoring code, that's always a bit worrying, because that's just kind of time down the drain. But there we go.
It's probably fair to say that this is one of the biggest open source projects on the planet.
Well, it's going to be the biggest, surely.
Well, if you're listening, if you're still awake,
you're
please.
Talking about Linux, right?
I'm talking about the kernel now. Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. So, people, if you're still awake, if you know of any bigger open source projects in terms of the overall kilo or 1,000 lines of code.
Well, there's always Postgres, I guess.
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
I'm sure that the kernel is bigger than Postgres.
Oh, yeah.
No, kernel's way simpler, right? It just has to deal with a few devices, do some scheduling.
Martin, Postgres
Stuff like
is
that,
just
memory
another
management.
Martin, I hate to break it to you, but Postgres is just another SQL database.
Well, you say that, but you're wrong.
Okay, if you want
Anyway,
to skip the next hour of boring SQL database discussions, just
we're not
press
actually
fast
talking about
forward on your
Postgres this
podcast
episode.
player.
Yeah. However,
Okay.
they have implemented Rust as a procedural language, in case you didn't know.
Martin, so does Redis and all the rest of them. I mean, that's not
No, Redis
news.
hasn't. No, Redis has not. You can't write
Of course, no.
in
Does what's it called? Redis JSON ring a bell?
Yeah, you're talking about modules.
Exactly. This is
No.
Rust.
This is just extending Redis with some features.
Yeah, but Postgres is
not
still
the same
C-based.
as PL Rust, which is a procedural language where end users can write Rust to do their functionality.
Now would be the time to insert a snoring sound effect.
Well, I wouldn't worry about it because
Recording.
many people will be asleep anyway. Asleep.
Jokes aside, databases are big, but I reckon the kernel is just bigger because
I don't know. It's debatable.
Enterprise
Anyway.
EDB people, please send in comments if you the email address is feedback@linuxinhouse.eu.
Let's do a word count, right? As we already decided. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So Postgres and other databases aside, it's probably fair to say that it's probably, never mind the sheer number of lines of code, it's probably the biggest project in terms of contributors. Over all contributors now.
Yes. Yes.
So Martin is still listening, or has fallen asleep anyway? Doesn't matter. Okay. No, jokes aside. It's probably fair to say that there's not a project that is as complex as the Linux kernel with regards to overall number of contributors, sheer volume, and all the rest of it. So introducing a change, I clearly see what's the word I'm looking for, the level of resistance that some people would exhibit going forward. But given the fact that Rust clearly brings some highly sought advantages to the table, is that what I'm looking for, as in something that is really contributing to the overall software quality going forward? I reckon more, and as I said, check out, details of course on the show notes. There are two pointers to presentations of something called Rust for Linux. And the update of this year, in 2024, is quite revealing because a lot of progress has been made. And I reckon, without getting too technical, the full support for kernel integration, including assembly as an inline assembly, is probably just one example. And another example would be the enhancement of something called bindgen, which essentially is a foreign function interface support for Rust in terms of how you integrate plain C code. And we talked about the memory issues already. With the overall Rust framework are probably the most prominent two examples here. So I reckon the infrastructure is there, as in the foundation is there. Now it's just a matter of moving more and more functionality. And as we saw previously, the LRU is just one example. Further details, check out the master branch of the kernel code. It's just one example. So I reckon over time, as in what I'm talking about the next 20 to 30 years, as the next kind of couple of decades, you will probably see, I'm hesitating a guess now, you will probably see Rust taking over with regards to the legacy code base, the C-based legacy code base at some stage. Won't happen anytime soon, needless to say, but the foundation clearly has been made, or has been laid rather.
Well, we shall see. If the flux capacitor was working, we could find out. But
yes,
sadly
exactly, exactly. So yes, so if you're listening to this episode in 2054, you probably have a better, if you're checking out the back catalog now, if we're still kind of recording by then, you probably have
2054, no chance. How old are you again? Yeah.
Martin will be dead.
Yeah,
I'm not
well,
sure about myself.
yeah.
Anyway, so as I said, if
Yeah.
you listen to this at some point in the future, I'm dead sure that my point is valid and my argument has been justified, for want of a better expression. Okay, on to the boxes, Martin.
Oh, yes.
What's the pick of the week?
My pick of the week. That's interesting. I have one. I wonder if there was another one. No, I'll probably go with. Yeah. Which one should I go with? You go first. Let me have a quick think about which
Okay,
one.
my box of the week is actually my pick of the week rather, is actually a long forgotten TV series called Kaput and Zosky. The subtitle is actually The Ultimate Obliterators. It broadcasts, I think, in the kind of broadcast. It broadcast in the 80s, maybe 90s. Of course, details in the show notes. It's about your two, and the hint is actually in the subtitle. It's something that is very close to the heart of a couple called Linux in-laws, because similar to Kaput and Sosky, these in-laws do have world domination in place. The couple called Kaput and Sosky do not leave it at the world, but rather they go interstellar.
Oh, yeah.
It's an animated series describing the exploits of this couple when trying to conquer foreign and alien planets. It's a pretty funny cartoon, if you're so inclined. It's ancient, by the way, of course. Okay. But it's still worth watching if you have the time and if you are so inclined in terms of if you get that dark kind of 80, 90 humor, that sort of thing. It's worth watching. I think IMDb gives it a solid 8 or something. Maybe I'm wrong with regards to the number of stars, but really funny.
Okay. Is this German? Or?
No, actually, it's American.
Oh, okay. Purely kaput is a German word.
Yeah, but you see, no, I mean, I'm just looking at the IMDb page, and the IMDb gives it 8.1 out of 10, which is a pretty high score. And no, kaput is actually, of course, it's a German word, but it has been adopted like Blitzkrieg and kindergarten, also in the modern English language.
American, you mean? Yeah, okay.
It is something like that, exactly. So, Martin, your pick of the week.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Paris Has Fallen series, which is very well executed and French.
So what is it about?
Well, there's a bit of a clue in the title, but yeah.
So I mean, you probably know the motto of said capital, right?
You know, I go on strike every day.
No, it's actually no. It goes way back further than that. It's actually ancient Latin.
And
the exact wording is actually fluctuat mergitor, which is of course Latin, but does translate into "we may sway, but we will never falter."
Oh, I see. Yeah, that does get mentioned in the
So, I mean, in that case, that TV series is pretty pointless, no? I'm just hazarding a guess now.
I don't want to give anything away, but.
Martin, just a tiny spoiler now. Do. Just a tiny spoiler now. Do.
Oh, I haven't finished it yet. It's a series after all.
So, what's the plot? Apart from Paris being destroyed or something.
No, Paris has not been destroyed yet. But the plot is really about a guy who's been wronged by various government officials, which obviously there are lots of, but he's taken it rather personal since they blew up his family and all that kind of stuff. So
in France.
No. He was a foreign legionnaire commander person.
I mean, you know that there's a place in Idaho called Paris, right?
No, I don't. I haven't been there, but I'll believe you. There are many place names they've reused.
I think there's a famous German movie called Paris, Idaho, but I may be mistaken.
Okay,
but I reckon there's
the one in France. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. That's one. That's the one we're talking about. Okay, fair enough.
But yeah, the bad guy, or the bad guy. It's a bit of debatable whether he's a bad guy or a good guy. But he's played by Sean Harris, he does a very good bad guy.
Okay. So, but you don't have to understand French if you want to watch it because it's American.
It is subtitles. It's subtitled. No.
It's French. It's French production. Okay. Wow.
By Studio
the
Kernel,
The French make good content beyond art house movies. Okay.
I think it's probably a a funded type of thing, so not entirely, let's say, normal arty France stuff. No.
I have a sneaking suspicion that the affirmative action crowd in Hollywood put some money into foreign funding series, and this is what they came up with.
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
Yeah, that's yeah. Well,
I see.
Worth a watch, yeah.
Very good. So we're talking about what? 20 series with 20 episodes each?
No, I don't know any series that are 20 episodes anymore these days. If you're
American Dad,
you're lucky if you get 6 or 9. Well, I don't watch that. Yeah.
Oh,
no! I'm just saying, Martin, there are mammoth TV series around.
Yeah, I suppose stuff like Grey's Anatomy has been going for a million years.
Exactly. Even before TV was invented.
Not that I ever watched it. But...
No, I'm just asking. No, I mean it's like a miniseries, like over 10 or 20 episodes, something with one series or whatever, or season rather.
No, it's probably more like 9 or something, or 6. I don't know.
Seasons.
No, episodes.
Episodes. Okay, in one season.
Yes.
That's tiny.
Yeah, well, it's more than enough. There's so much of Paris you can blow up there.
I see. So, without giving away too much, Paris is still stands, so it hasn't been blown up yet. But this is just a movie, right? So, or rather, a TV series. Okay. But Martin, we do have additional feedback.
We do.
Yes.
We do,
Martin, because because YouTube Music, subsidiary of Google, of course, did send us a mail.
Oh, well, lots of people send us mails. Mainly
Yes,
our website that they want to improve, and our
no, you see, Martin,
they want to improve
Martin,
for a very small fee. But...
as soon as the Halloween episode was uploaded, yes, YouTube Music spotted an apparent copyright violation.
Oh dear.
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
Yes, Martin, indeed.
What was it?
Apparently, we used Highway to Hell in the wrong way without getting permission from AC/DC in the first place.
Use it literally, didn't we? So...
Well, you see, this is where Google really
classifies as a copyright infringement.
You see, I mean, exactly. I mean, I'm almost tempted to say that qualifies as an anti-pox.
Yeah.
Because what, of course, this artificial intelligence, and it can't be a human as a natural, because otherwise it would have spotted fair use Google. If you're listening, forget about this implementation, fire the engineers, redo it, because this is just hilarious. So, I mean, it's just basically a simple pattern matching algorithm, apparently, because they're just going for some similarity, I would reckon, but do not take the context into account, because otherwise they would have spotted immediately that this was fair use, which of course it was. People, if you don't know what I'm talking about, please listen to the Halloween episode. It's in your podcatcher, so that it all becomes clear of what this anti-box pretty much refers to. Again, Google, if you're listening, -10 out of 5 or something. Not great. As in an engineering cluster fuck up. You may want to take notice and rectify this ASAP. So that's the feedback. Any comment, Martin? Given the fact that you are the artificial intelligence
I expect they won't be listening, sadly. But apart from their They're bots.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Let me rephrase this. Artificial intelligence.
Yes.
As in deep mind at Google. If you're listening, or YouTube Music, if you're listening,
room for improvement there.
This qualifies as a fuck up. If you don't know what a fuck up is, please look it up in your dictionary. You don't want to do this again? Please retrain your neural networks ASAP so that this fuck up doesn't happen again.
Good plan.
Hope dies last, as they say in the trade.
This is the Linux in-laws.
You come for the knowledge,
but stay for the madness.
Thank you for listening.
This podcast is licensed under the latest version of the Creative Commons license, type Attribution Share Alike. Credits for the intro music go to Blue Sea Roosters for their song Solid Market, to Twin Flames for their piece called The Flow, used for the segment intros, and finally to Celestial Ground for their song Sweet Justice, used by the Dark Side. You find these and other ditties licensed under CC at Jamendo, a website dedicated to liberate the music industry from choking copyright legislation and other crap concepts. And cut. Martin, are you serious? Fortran.
Yeah.
Do you know anybody? Alive, that is.
Oh, I can find someone, I'm sure.
About what, 96 years old in a retirement home?
Well.
You serious?
Yes.
Do you know anybody?
Not in person, but I can find someone, no worry.
Yeah, but Martin, okay. Some ground rules. He, she, or it has to be able to produce coherent sentences.
Well,
the language English
in the current company is
the language English being at the very top of that list. I just say, okay. Second ground rule. What that person says has to make sense. In the year 2025,
that's
26,
also
or 27.
debatable. That none of our stuff usually makes sense.
Martin, this is beside the point.
Is it? Okay. Okay.
You know, jokes aside, I mean, in
don't
the
worry about it. I'll sort it out.
CUDA is C, right? OpenCV, there. It's no. I mean,
well, there's many different libraries, but yeah, C++ is one of the main ones.
Okay, the people at OpenCV apparently are taking very serious look at Rust with regards to moving away from C, but rather to Rust.
Well, but it all depends on the libraries for the GPU, so it's not really anything to do with, or are they intending to write some libraries in Rust?
Not all of the people using OpenCV have GPUs at their disposal. Some people choose to run this on plain CPUs. Simple as that.
Oh dear. I hope they have a lot of patience.
Martin, have you taken a look at what cloud providers charge for GPU arrays in contrast to ordinary VMs?
No. You don't need a GPU array. You just need a decent.
Yeah, but have you taken a look at the prices?
No, I haven't because I don't need to.
Martin, yes.
Well, actually, I have looked at this in the past. Yeah.
Martin, but not everybody has a backyard to spare for a GPU array.
Okay, or something like that. Yeah. But you don't need it to run OpenCV anyway. It's just you only need the big stuff for doing some learning, so it's okay.
Okay, fair enough.
All fine.
But you see, these hipsters that are concerned with deep learning and machine learning, what have you, they don't use Fortran. They do not.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that they're right. It just means that they're following the trend like sheep. That's what they're doing.
Yes. I see that point, Martin. Excellent.
Glad to.
Never mind the fact that there's a couple of billions being poured into that cheap movement. Fair enough.
That's a different matter.
I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
So dig up these Fortran corpses.
Yep,
We're going to do an episode with them, alive or not.
Get my shovel at the ready.